everyone. Welcome to myself, Max McGillivray from Beanstalk. This is another of our webinar series, which has got a really interesting twist, and we've got some really interesting people on it, which I can't wait to show you to bring in. If you're not aware of Beanstalk, Beanstalk is a social enterprise that we've created that supports, educates, and promotes the global fresh food industry to help it thrive and grow faster. The whole aspect of social entrepreneurship is rapidly changing the future of business, even more so as we hopefully come out of lockdown. And our view is that traditional businesses in some respects have the responsibility to provide their support and expertise in accelerating such opportunities within their sectors. And that's what we've looked to do with Beanstalk. So our main aim is to promote, educate, excite people, not only in the trade, but also within the consumer base. I was just showing off to the guys earlier that we're very fortunate to have upwards of 96,000 followers on the likes of Facebook. So we love to tell that public audience about what happens within the fresh food sectors and also the trade as well. So we're now on, I think this is our 20th or 21st webinar that we've conducted over the last three months. And we would not have been able to have done that if it wasn't for the great support of the sponsors behind us. So no particular order. We've got the likes of Green Cell, who's the UK arm of Westphalia Fruit. And they're some of the biggest avocado growers on a global basis, and just an amazing business in respect of what they do in South Africa and the other countries they're involved in. We've got KANTAR, we've got Joe from KANTAR, who's going to tell us all about KANTAR in a minute. We've got Farms.com, who's a recruitment business based out of North America with job sites in North America, but also they run DeLacy within the UK that predominantly work within the ag sectors. We've got MDS. We did a fantastic webinar with recently. So the management development services, they want to help the fresh food sectors to find and train the best possible people, best possible trainees. So they're going to be the future of the industry. Vida Fresh, my friend Terry, hopefully you're plugged in and turn up to 11. When there's a problem with the sound, it's not us, it's at your end. So make sure you turn up your sound. Vida Fresh are one of the fastest growing businesses in fresh produce on a tropical basis, on a tropical product basis. AC Gotham, can't forget them. Carol and the team there, they are some of the best apple growers in the UK. We've got Blue Skies, inspirational business. They're making slice and dice fresh fruit products out of the likes of Ghana, Benin, Egypt, South Africa, and Brazil. Again, if you ever get the chance to go to their site in Ghana, inspirational business to have a look at. Mustn't forget Red Fox executive recruitment business. So if you're looking for mid-management or senior level people within the fresh food sectors, either in a UK or an international business, come and talk to us. So sponsors, we couldn't do this type of broadcast if it wasn't for those sponsors, and likewise we couldn't do it if it wasn't for you. We've got, looking at the stats here, upwards of 5 nations dialing into this, and a large number of people. Questions, don't be afraid to ask these guys questions on the subject of the day, because they are the experts. If you want to know the information, ask them either on this broadcast or come to me or come to them direct afterwards. So come on, what are we talking about today? You don't want to hear from me all day. Today we're talking about the FPJ Big 50. So let's get everyone in so that we can talk about this in more detail. So Michael, Joe, Ed, Fred, please all pile in. Here they come. Excellent. Okay, so let's just run around the tables, and we'll just guys, if you could just give a quick introduction to yourself and what you do, and let's start off with the FPJ, the Fresh Produce team. So Michael, take it away, please. Who are you and what do you do?
Hello, Max. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Barker. I've been a horticultural journalist for the best part of 20 years, actually. So across a number of publications. As many of you will know, I was until recently editor of the Fresh Produce Journal. Stood down in December to pursue a freelance career, but I'm still really pleased to be continuing as contributing editor to FPJ. So I'm lucky to have contributed to this latest edition of the Big 50. So yeah, looking forward to talking about it.
Well done. And Michael, if any of you have not seen Michael in the respect of the editorial work that he does, but also the events that he's run previously for the FPJ and FruitNet Media. The last one that comes to mind, Michael, give me a steer. FPJ Live at Coventry was one of the best events that I attended, especially with the involvement with Fred and Ed, and the way that you bossed it around, that you had 3-4 different stages. So sometimes you're positively confused to, I want to listen to this chap, but no, I want to listen to this lady. And so it encapsulated the fresh produce sector so well in the respect of the community that you brought there. So Michael's done a fantastic job within the role at the FPJ. So Fred, come on, tell us all about you, please, Fred.
Hi, yeah. So my name's Fred Searle. I'm now the magazine editor of the FPJ, taking over from Michael a few months back. We've kind of had a bit of a change when it comes to how the magazine's produced. So we've switched from fortnightly to roughly monthly publications. And we're making it a bit more kind of long form and in depth. And we're going for big interviews and more kind of feature-based style of magazine. And alongside me, we've got Ed, who's been in charge of launching the app, which he'll tell you a bit about. But yeah, no, it's been great. I've been at the FPJ for about 5 years now and really enjoying it still.
And Fred, there's a number of students that are dialed into this, and they might, no offense to them, they might naively not know about the FPJ. Can you just give us some facts and figures? How old are you? Not you personally, the magazine. How old are you, and what is the reach, and how can they subscribe, please?
So we are 125 years old this year, actually. We've
Wow.
got an anniversary issue of the magazine coming up later in the year. We've got a global reach. It's UK focused, but we've got a global reach, and we're increasingly reporting on how suppliers in the likes of Spain, the Netherlands, Eastern Europe, France, and Italy do business with the UK, and we want to really kind of push that side of the publication.
Well done, and I got to highlight it. If I can get the screen up without my glasses on. Can one of you guys, let's go back to you, Michael. Can you just tell us about the app, please?
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna sidestep that one and give it to Ed, because he's done amazing work creating this whole app from scratch, and he can tell you all about it.
Ed, over to you. Who are you, please?
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Max. I'm Ed Leahy. I'm the digital editor of the FPJ now. I guess I'm the noob here. I joined 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. And I've been working on this app for the last sort of 8 months or longer. And even though we had a previous iteration of the app, which was effectively sort of PDF editions it would upload, this is a kind of all singing, all dancing, new Pug Pig designed app. They did The Economist, they do The Telegraph and stuff like that. So it just offers better, more sort of interactive editions of the magazine. And the app itself is free to download on Google Play and the App Store. So do give it a try, and then you can subscribe to the magazine through there.
Ed, Carol Ford has just come in with what is the name of the app, please, so that they can find it.
Fresh Produce Journal app. If you in Google Play, Google Fresh Produce Journal app or App Store, it's the first thing that will come up. Just hit install, and it'll be on your phone.
Fantastic. There you go, Carol. We should have worked that out ourselves. And later on in the conversation, we're also looking to just highlight the FPJ Live event on the 6th of October. Michael, should we come back to you on that a little bit later?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, because we don't want to forget about Joe. Joe, come on in. Tell us all about yourself, please.
Cheers, Max. So for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Joe Shaw-Roberts. I run the fresh produce team at KANTAR. For those of you who aren't familiar with KANTAR, we are all about consumer behaviour, quantifying and analysing that. So as you can imagine, it's been an absolutely fascinating time to be working in that sector. There's been some change that's never happened and probably never will happen on this scale again, hopefully, given the events of the last few months. So I'm here to help you make sense of it all and have some content to present to you over the course of the next hour.
Well done, Joe. And I just need to highlight you that again, I'm just going to refer back to students or perhaps people on the periphery of this sector. They don't understand how important KANTAR is. Yes, the businesses that are actually growing, producing, supplying the retailers or the retailers themselves, it might just seem like a mercurial business. but one thing that they all strive on, more so now than ever, is data. Information is power. So Ed, can you just quickly mine down, give a little bit more information as to whether how you would look to assist a larger company or a retailer with that information so that they can use it, so that they can progress? How do you do that, please?
Sure. So if you're a produce manufacturer and you're going into a retailer meeting, you're meeting with the exotic fruits buyer, you want to present to the exotic fruits buyer that you have a thorough knowledge of the category and that you see some opportunities to grow it before you present your proposition in there. That's very difficult to do without some hard quantified data. So that's where we come in. We can help look at where the opportunities are to grow a category, grow a market, through looking at consumer behavior and looking at where the gaps in the markets are and presenting that in a succinct way to clients.
Well done, Joe. And we've already presented over a number of leads during this lockdown period when we've been doing this webcast for people who wanted to engage with Joe. So if you want to engage with Joe, you can either find him on via LinkedIn or come to me direct on the various emails that you've seen, so that we can put you in contact with Joe and KANTAR. So come on, guys, we're on the subject of the day, the FPJ Big 50. So Michael, should we start with you, if that's okay? What you've got two publications that you do, and just to highlight the previous one, the FPJ Big 50 companies. I know that people voraciously want to look at this because it's a bit like we were talking earlier on the warm up about the Premier League. Everyone wants to see where everyone is, and to compare and to contrast. So what were the thoughts behind these two publications? And presumably that this was a hell of a piece of work for you, Michael, and the team to do. So what was the methodology? What was the thought behind it, please, Michael?
Yeah, they're both, to be honest, the hardest things that we produce in terms of the amount of research and journalism that goes into putting them together. You can imagine the uproar if we leave somebody out of the big 50 companies, or we get some figures wrong in the products. So there's a meticulous amount of work that goes into it. We originally set them back up in 2014 and 2015. The big 50 companies was the first one, and the products followed in 2015. And what we wanted to do was create definitive rankings, which created conversation, which got people talking, which made people want to rise up and down the charts and so on. And funnily enough, with the companies report, I've had chief executives telling me, oh, we want to put on an extra 10 million of turnover so we can get above our rivals and stuff. Fantastic. And I was talking to some of the carrots and onion guys, and one of the questions was, well, are we above onions this year, or have they pipped us? So it creates a little bit of excitement and something to talk about. But more important than anything, it's a reference guide for the industry of how certain products and companies are going. In terms of the products, which is what we're here to talk about, it's a collaboration between ourselves and KANTAR. They obviously monitor all that data from the supermarkets and from consumer purchasing patterns. And that's how we rank the data. It's 52-week data. In the first one, back in 2015, the fresh produce category was worth £9.9 billion. And it's now, that's at retail, I should say, and it's now worth £11.5 billion. So we've seen a really good increase. And in case you're wondering if that's just price inflation, as I think any grower will tell you, it's not price inflation. It's very much a case of volume growth. The volumes at that time were 5.94 billion kilos, and that's gone up to 6.34 billion kilos sold. So we're seeing an increase in the amount of fresh produce sold and purchased. And just to give you an idea of how it's moved between then and now, the top 5 products 5 years ago were dessert apples at number 1, grapes, tomatoes, bananas, and old potatoes making up the top 5. Dessert apples are still number 1, so Carol will be pleased to see that. Followed by tomatoes, which have moved up to number 2. Grapes there at 3. Strawberries, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, have broken into the top 5 and have made number 4, which is very much a reflection of the ongoing growth of the berry category. And bananas at number 5. So while some products have done well, others have suffered a bit. We've seen cooking apples and Swedes fall out of the list altogether, whereas products such as avocados and blackberries have really moved on up over the years. So there's been some quite interesting trends to look at.
Michael, well done. Joe, let's come to you if it's okay, because you, on the 2 or 3 previous webinars that you've kindly participated with us on, you've been, I used this word earlier, very mercurial as to giving your insight as to what's happened to date, to the point of being able to, in some ways, predict what's going to happen in the future. So what's your take on the back of what you've seen with the involvement of the Big 50, and also, I suppose I have to ask it, if you could encapsulate what your views are as we've come through lockdown and hopefully coming out the other end. So what are your views as to how the fresh produce sector is progressing, please, Joe?
Sure. I think it's nice to frame it in terms that we're all kind of striving to achieve as well. So, you know, not just how categories are performing, but, you know, are we eating more fruit and veg? Are we becoming healthier? And some really interesting stats are coming out of this lockdown period. In May, for instance, we had 3.4 of our 5 a day on average. And in that same period last year, we had 3.1. So, you know, it might sound not a very, very large amount, 0.3 of a banana or whatever, but that's a really big step in the right direction for consumption of produce and just where we need to be heading to as a nation. You know, we're more engaged with fresh produce than we were 5 years ago. We're shopping this on an extra 5 trips to the supermarkets, and we're buying an extra 2 categories that we were in 2015. So the backdrop is looking really, really good. However, we still got to remember that our net food and drink spend is so far down. If you look at the out of home element as well over lockdown, we're still about 250 to 280 million pounds down weekly on our total food and drink spend. And that's going to be really challenging going forward as we all feel pressure to probably go out and live our lives as we were, but then don't quite feel comfortable with that, given the health circumstances. So you've got this really interesting dynamic between, you know, you've got a very unique recession coming up where the initial impact has been driven by a lot more time spent at home and the different consumer behaviours associated with that. And as we move further and further down the chain, you're going to be looking at more and more the impact of more cautious spending. So things like shoppers buying cheaper products, trying to trade down to value tiers that will impact the sector and will impact many sectors. I think the Office of Budgetary Responsibility have just come out and said that they expect UK GDP to be to take about 2 years to get back to where it was pre-coronavirus. So we need to be looking at a period of 2 years plus, I think, when considering what the implications for consumer behaviour are going to be.
Joe, well done. I did a very interesting Beanstalk 20 on 20 interview with a chap called Peter Backman, who's a food service expert, and it was fascinating what he was saying about the demise of food service in the short term and how that whole offering is going to change. This earlier today, it's been reported on the news feeds about Ocado stating in a slightly self-promotional basis that retail is never going to be the same again, because home delivery is here to stay. Specifically within fresh produce, Joe, do you think that we're going to see this escalation of fresh produce sales as people work out that we have to be fit and healthy to counter COVID-19? There's that infamous quote from Boris Johnson that he wants to get the nation healthier because he was too fat, and that was one of the reasons why he got COVID. So, Joe, do you think? So it's a bit of a generalist question, but do you think we are the sector collectively in a good spot to prosper because more people are going to be eating more fresh produce?
I think if we go back to that stat of 3.4 a day versus 3.1 a day items of fruit and veg, that shows what's possible in the space of 3 months. So we look at another 3 months down the line, suddenly we're at nearly 4 of our 5 a day, and a few months later we're pretty much getting it. I think it just shows you the extent to which, if we put our minds to it and focus on eating healthily, the sector can really, really grow. And the past few months show that there's massive demand for that. So I think, yeah, the stats show that we're definitely heading in the right direction. We know that in times of economic downturn, scratch cooking tends to rise, and we're going to see a prolonged period of scratch cooking. That should be a good thing for fresh produce, a good thing for getting more vegetables in our diet, especially. There are some gaps in the market for produce to fill as well. If you look at how online's growing, fresh produce isn't geared up for online to the same extent that a lot of other categories are. And fruit in particular is missing out on a lot of online sales that it could be getting if it communicated that offer better to consumers in the moment of purchase. So lots of room for growth, in short.
Well done. And Joe, do you think with this escalation of more fresh produce being bought, do you think that means that the growers the marketing desk, they might be able to gain a better margin from the retailers? Cool. There's a question.
Being totally honest, I mean, not my place to say what retailer strategy is or isn't going to be. Given the current climate, it looks like that will be difficult, given the retailer focus on value activity, and particularly on Tesco's recent announcement that they want suppliers to fund a lot of the lower prices that they're committing to and price matching Aldi. That's very much a defensive strategy, and they're going with what they know there. When they introduced the farm brands and tertiary brands previously, that had a marked impact on switching losses to the discounters. So there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on suppliers, I think, going forward.
Yeah, Joe, well done. Thank you, and sorry for the predictable dictatorial question from me. It's just that element is just going to be it's just going to be fascinating. That you would hope that as the market progresses and that there are more sales, that the growers, the marketeers can prosper so that they can invest more in their companies. So come on, let's get over to Fred and Ed. They're the machine shop behind this amazing publication. So guys, help me on this. So Fred, we're going to talk with you about potatoes and salads, and Ed, we're going to talk to you about on the fruit side. So let's start with you, Ed. Let's start with you. What have you seen on the fruit side that you were perhaps surprised at, or you weren't surprised at, and in the respect of the composition of this document?
I mean, I guess there's always surprises in every year of the publication that we do. This year obviously was different with coronavirus, and the first thing that jumped out when talking to suppliers about citrus in particular was how well they had done. Citrus sales rocketed. I don't think it's actually fully reflected in the data because we I've got my lemon with me. Because the data we did was, I think, up until you have to correct me if it's till April, I think it is. So the sort of full manifestation of sort of success of citrus didn't quite come through. But talking to suppliers, they're saying they had just huge demand for citrus categories, oranges, lemons. So that was the first trend that I picked out in my trend report, and that's inevitably just because, as Joe was alluding to, sort of focusing on health and wellness and well-being, and the desired sort of vitamin C is that inevitable kind of talking point whenever you get sick or there's a flu going around. So people really went in on citrus, and that was certainly the main kind of boom fruit. I wrote about it as it was happening as well. Berries continued to perform really well. There was a sort of discussion about how shorter shelf life products will do as people started buying on bulk for longer life products. And it seems like it has affected it a bit. I know my colleague Mike Knowles wrote in Europe how strawberry sales were really suffering as a result of the lockdown as people purchased longer lasting products. And I wrote in the trend report that there has been this sort of slight slowdown over the last 5 years in the value of berry products. I mean, it's still incredibly high. It averages around 7%. But I think it'd be interesting to watch that going forward as to how much berries can keep increasing penetration and keep this kind of the huge value increases that we see.
So Ed, do you think, so my pieces of fruit here, I got some flat peaches from Spain and clementines from South Africa. So on the basis that is going to be obviously long lasting in comparison to a flat peach. So do you think that's why we're seeing an upsurge of citrus, because especially during the COVID situation, that it was just easier to transport, easier to get into store, and as such people are now even more excited about the likes of citrus, so we'll look to buy more?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think shelf life definitely played a factor. I think it was just the vitamin C factor personally. I think people immediately went out and started looking for some products rich in vitamin C, and citrus is the kind of the classic is the classic one. Lemon and honey and all that definitely played a factor. I mean, you can't also ignore just how much the categories improved with things like easy peelers over the years. Much better varieties coming through. Retailers often sort of putting out some good promotional activity on that as well. And also citrus has just been doing well in general over the last couple of years. Things like drinks have been helping out with lemons and whatnot. So that's a category that actually in some ways continues to surprise, because like a few years back with things like oranges were a little bit flat. you know, that's actually really kind of galvanized itself, and it's looking quite strong now.
And so do you think that the good old staples, Ed, such as the likes of bananas, do you think there will be a seismic shift over the next couple of years as we work through the economic and the social situation we're all in?
I don't know about seismic shift. I mean, obviously bananas is a huge category, and it's kind of the staple fresh produce in many ways. It's long lasting, it's transportable, it's kind of ideal. I mean, bananas, yeah, we don't see too much movement with bananas, unlike strawberries, which still post quite big sort of volume and value growth. So I think, as I mentioned in my trend report, I'm quite excited by stone fruit. I think climbing up the rankings going forward, maybe that will be where I see the next sort of shift, in that we have so many varieties coming through from across the globe with stone fruits. And even though something like plums, which was a bit of a faller this year, I still get a lot of optimism from plum suppliers that there's some exciting things happening going forward. So maybe that will be the next shift.
Ed, it feels like instead of us having major politicians, prime ministers, presidents waving around face masks and drugs that they've tested, they should have been waving around fresh fruits, because we might have all seen an escalation of people being better and escalation of sales. So Ed, thank you, Fred. So come on, what have you seen on the potato and the salad side?
So one of the interesting products that I picked out was spinach. Got a huge bag of spinach here from Lidl, and that rose in value sales by 9.1%, which made it one of the biggest rises in this year's list. And one of the big trends in that category was the move from washed to unwashed products, which generally comes in the bags. And that's not a trend that you would expect to see necessarily, but it's driven by the fact that those bigger packs, although they are more expensive, they're better value for money. And that is something which increased during lockdown, as you might expect, consumers switching to better value products that they can get more use out of and more value for money. But it's a trend that began actually before the pandemic, which is quite interesting, as a kind of good value proposition for consumers. And so that surprised me somewhat. But that large value increase, it was driven by higher prices, significant increase in trip volume, but there were still drops in penetration and purchase frequency, which is something which was particularly notable during lockdown. Consumers were going to the supermarket less often, but generally trying to buy more per trip.
Fred, I don't know if you saw the article, and if I can find it, I'll send it on to you. The Financial Times a couple of weeks ago, in a weekend edition, the journalist there was promoting the fact that salad production in the likes of the States is such a monoculture, and all it is doing is growing large leaves for large Americans to scoop up blue cheese when they can go to the all they can eat buffet. And coming to the FPJ again, I think that's why it's so important for us to have a representation in this sector, to actually point out the stories, the people, and the love and passion that goes into the sector. Fred, the salad sector is fascinating in itself. The growth that I saw when I was first coming into the industry in the 90s, with the likes of G's and the likes of Langmeads and bagged salads coming to the fore, rather than no offense to our parents being more used to say whole head lettuce. Fred, can you see how that salad side is going to evolve? Is it still going to be an increase of salad consumption, or is it has it reached a plateau? What do you think, please?
I know I see room for further growth, but interestingly, you're saying that there has been over time a real shift towards prepared bagged salads, but actually during lockdown that reversed, and there was a bit of a revival for whole head for the same reasons that I talked about in spinach, and it'll be interesting to see how long that continues for. I think that's a trend which we might see for the next couple of years at least, with a recession on the way. And also, I mean, personally, I find whole head salad products a better option for me, because I'm concerned about food waste, and that is something which people are increasingly aware of. And I wonder whether that will also be a factor in people's purchasing decisions.
So, Joe, let's just come over to you. There's 2 points I just want to present over to you. William Burgess has just asked, what do you think will happen demand-wise for organic produce? So Produce World, William's business, they've got a great organic business there. And just to caveat that as well, Joe, no, I forgot the question. Joe, what do you think about organics? Do you think that's going to plateau, or on the scratch cooking basis, do you think we're going to see an escalation of organic sales?
I think 2 points to bear in mind. One, organic is currently growing ahead of non-organic. It's growing through new shoppers coming into that market who didn't buy it previously. And I think I'm pretty sure that's driven by that kind of frenzy we're in when we go to the supermarket now. We're looking for anything, or at least we were in those initial months. We're just looking to stock up on whatever we can find, and organic will have done a lot better for that, coupled with the fact that about 1 in 3 of us are the same or better off than we were before lockdown, because of the freeze in what's available for us to spend our money on. So it's doing well in the short term. Caveat to that is, if we look back to the previous recession in 2007-8, organic was in similarly strong growth around that point, and it took about 7 years to reach its pre-recession heights. So you've got to consider the next few years as well, even if the market's in strong growth at the moment, and we are going to be in an environment where consumers are looking to save money. Organics doesn't play well into that, unfortunately.
Can I jump in on that one? I see huge growth potential for organics, and I get a little bit frustrated, almost on behalf of organic producers, at how poorly we're performing in this category. If you look at the United States, where they've got almost 10% market penetration for organics, and that's a comparable market to ours in terms of the type of consumer and the size of the market. Similarly, in Germany, they have 7-8%. Denmark, I think, is into double figures, but we're somewhere around the 2 to 3% mark. We have a similar consumer demographic to these countries, so we really ought to be getting much, much higher sales, whether that's a marketing job or a job of producers. I'm not really sure, probably a combination of all of them. But I do think that these trends that happen in other countries do tend to filter through here. And so we'll probably start to see that in the coming years. So I think the organic category is going to grow quite substantially. People are more and more concerned about health. And I'd be very surprised if we don't see at least a doubling of the organic category in the next few years.
There you go, everyone. Michael said it. And the question I was going to throw to Joe, but I'm going to throw to everyone. When I did this interview with this amazing chap, Peter Backman, a food service expert, he was saying about how some of the food service companies are pivoting. So we've seen the escalation of sales for the likes of HelloFresh and Mindful Chef. I think Mindful Chef, I think it was in March, they saw a 400% increase of sales. Peter was saying that the takeout market is now rapidly expanding, because the problem with the likes of Deliveroo and Uber is that when you go out for a meal, you enjoy the theatre of it, and the theatre of having a meal dumped on your doorstep in a brown paper bag isn't that exciting. High-end restaurants are now pivoting, so that they're finishing off the meal. So it's 80-90% of the way done. It's then presented to you with cooking instructions, and on a Friday, Saturday night, you then finish it off to your family to restaurant standards. So I found that fascinating, that food service sector is trying to recover by finding new ways. With everyone who's involved in these as companies, are we going to see a change of market for them? We already know that the likes of Amazon have declared that it's either 7 or 9 depots that they are going to be swapping over to cater for fresh food, because they want a slice of this enormous home delivery market juggernaut that's coming. So guys, do you think there's going to be a shift, that a number of producers, marketeers watching this, instead of serving a retailer, they're actually going to be serving someone different, like an Amazon or a company that might not even exist today, or an app that might not even exist today? Guys, what do you think? Joe, should we start with you?
I was just thinking it ties in quite nicely with the trend of how we're consuming produce at the moment. So I think 86% of scratch cooked occasions feature some item of fresh produce. So, you know, when we're making our meals from scratch, we have to use an onion, tomatoes, etc. But there's a real gap in the market for produce to get into meals at home and out of home that are kind of more of an assembled nature. So you're having something that's easier for you, more of a kind of solution to the consumer rather than the consumer doing it all themselves. And that ties in quite nicely to that opportunity, I think, Max. If we can make it easier for shoppers to get their 5 a day, we can really accelerate some of these trends that we're talking about and make sure that we get up to 5 a day and the billions of pounds of growth that will provide for the industry.
No, well done. And guys, just before the rest of you answer, Anthony from Bardsley's made a really good point here that I've overlooked. And he states, are we seeing any evidence from consumers making climate and environmental decisions in their purchases? We've seen this in meat and the shift to plant-based proteins. Are we seeing this play out in fresh produce, i.e., e.g., buy more British or buy more environmentally friendly produce? Fred, what do you think?
I think there has been an element of that, particularly among millennials and younger consumers who have those concerns more front of mind. I don't think that the vast majority of consumers are taking those kinds of things into consideration when they go to the supermarket. I think it's still a minority of consumers, but I think where organic producers can really capitalize is if they also stress the flavor advantage of their products. I know that organic carrots, for example, have done a big piece of work on promoting the additional flavor of their produce, and so I think it's good to promote the environmental and sustainability aspect alongside the taste.
Ed, views?
Sorry, Michael want to jump in or?
No, just a very quick point.
Don't let Michael. Oh, go on, Michael.
I'll be really quick. I just think the category as a whole is benefiting from those trends. If people are concerned about environmentalism when it comes to their dairy or their meat, or well, especially obviously meat, and they're reducing the amount of meat they're eating and maybe increasing their vegan options, that is going to benefit the category, fresh produce category as a whole, where the meat alternatives involve vegetables or even fruit.
Guys, and there's you look at the comments coming in now. That there's so much here that, as Carol says, is there a possibility to promote more UK fresh produce? A mile north of my site here, we've got a huge glasshouse build to grow tomatoes, because, as we all know, 80% of all salads are exported in, and God knows what's going to happen when we get to Brexit. We've got the environmental element here. We've got the health element here, and there seems to be, I suppose, in some respects, confusion as to we've got so many good things to talk about and to promote to the consumer. But Fred, as you stated, it could be. Oh, I don't want to say the Waitrose shopper. The Waitrose shopper may be a bit more leaning towards the environmental element of the fresh produce. But then if you've got a family of 6 up in the Midlands somewhere, and all they need is cheap food, and how can we influence them to start buying more fresh produce? Carol, I do have an English apple, more fresh produce rather than, excuse my French, crap from the from the pizza house. So come on, Michael, I'm going to throw that back to you. With your marketing head on, how can we encapsulate all of this information that we're getting through, that you've created, to influence the shopper to buy more fresh produce and ideally in season fresh produce? What do you think, Michael?
I think it's happening anyway. I mean, I suppose the question, what you're really asking, is, do we need some kind of industry initiative to push it? I don't know if that's what you're saying. I mean, I think all we can do is keep reinforcing that message that the product is healthy, it's safe to eat, it's been produced under the best possible conditions. And, you know, there's nothing like a global pandemic to reinforce the importance of strong local supply chains. So that local element is being reinforced all the time. We're seeing news reports from farms, you know, this weekend, not particularly the best example, but generally, you know, of how farmers are doing brilliant jobs getting food onto shelves. And it's, you know, it's local farmers that we're seeing, local producers, local growers, and that just keeps reinforcing that message. And that's the best thing we can do. Well
done. Fred, potatoes. What is your take on on potatoes, because there seems to be a lot of optimism about potatoes. You got the likes of Chris Evans lauding potatoes over the last couple of weeks, but then you got the oddity of the Veg Power campaign, which is a fantastic campaign, but not wanting to adopt potatoes because they didn't see that they fitted the remit of the healthy living criteria. Potatoes, where do you think that category is going, please, Fred?
So potatoes have had quite an interesting ride over the last few years. There's been kind of a gradual decline in sales related to health concerns and related to the growing popularity of other carbohydrates like rice, pasta, couscous, etc., which have been increasingly seen by consumers to be a kind of more practical, easy option. But potato sales have had a slight revival in the past couple of years and have benefited from lockdown, partly because they've got a good shelf life, they're good value, and particularly new potatoes and baking potatoes saw some pretty positive sales. I think, volume sales of new potatoes were up 3.3%.
Okay.
And baking potatoes were up 3.5%. That didn't necessarily translate into value increases, but I think what has been kind of crucial to potato suppliers recently has been switching to smaller pack sizes, which are more geared to 1 or 2 person households and smaller families. I think although bigger pack sizes have been popular during lockdown, generally people are looking for smaller options, so there's less waste, and that they're not as kind of intimidated by the size of the pack. But I think potatoes have been tarred by the health brush unfairly in recent years, and I think that especially with a recession coming, they could actually be in for a bit of a bounce.
Well done. And a really interesting point from Damien Butler in brassicas. There seems to be a great reset on value upwards, which seems to be holding. Does the panel see it continuing? So Fred, just as you're our resident expert on that area, do you see that value of brassicas upholding, staying here for the long term?
I mean, I think so, because they're very healthy products, and I mean, Tender Stem in particular has been really successful. It's kind of more of a premium brassica. The quality is very reliable and it's very versatile as a product, and that's something that they've been keen to kind of push in their marketing. But I think generally popularity could continue to increase, but production has been very difficult. The past couple of seasons have been a bit of a nightmare for UK growers. The chair of the British Brassicas Association, Jack Ward, warned that there needs to be an urgent review of production in the UK because costs have been getting out of control. So it might be that we're going to see more imports going forward. Let's see.
And Fred, it's a fascinating point that you make about Tender Stem. You think of the brands that we have in fresh produce in the UK. Off the top of my head, you can only mention 2, which is Tender Stem and the likes of Pink Lady. And I suppose that's a debate, perhaps another webcast for another time with all of you, as to would the sector be in an even better place in the respect of educating the consumer and the growers, the marketeers earning more margin to invest if there was a brand, if they were allowed to promote a brand. But that's a conversation for another time. Michael, we're slightly side skipping veg per se. With you being our resident expert on the FPJ Big 50 for veg, what's your take on that, please?
We've seen a lot of those trends that we've already talked about having a really big impact on the vegetable category, particularly in terms of the whole head taking on a bigger role. What I found really interesting was that we've seen a little bit of a fight back for what you might call slightly unfashionable vegetables. So leek sales were up 16% by volume in the last year. Parsnips up 9%, courgettes up 7%, and broccoli up 5%. And I think the category has probably benefited, and we'll see this more in next year's figures, from the fact that at a time of year when actually we had probably the best spring we've ever had, instead people were at home cooking from scratch, and that really benefited the category. And we saw sales of things like garlic and onions, kind of proper ingredient products, doing extremely well. So that whole veg category was uplifted by that. And just going back into the question that you asked, I can see quite good growth for the brassica sector. Cauliflowers have seen really significant growth. A few years ago, you would have said this was a product absolutely on the way out, had no future whatsoever. And suddenly it became a really big deal in America. Like, people started eating it, became fashionable again. And that's translated across to here. And you've got cauliflower rice, and you've got cauliflower pizza bases. And suddenly it's being incorporated into all kinds of different dishes. And actually see a huge amount of future for the brassica sector again. So it's quite positive, really. There's also just one last point on that. We've seen a lot of innovation in the veg category as well. Suppliers are finding quite good ways to enthuse people about getting their veg. So Floret launched a microwavable green bean pouch in the last year, and Mash Direct created carrot and parsnip fries. So this kind of stuff really creates a bit of excitement for the category and encourages people to buy in, I think.
Well done. So guys, this is a fantastic publication, but isn't this slightly irrelevant as to what's going to happen at the end of the year? As one of our viewers has just dialed in, and they're stating, I'm a bit concerned about the supply of fruit and veg after Brexit kicks in, knowing that the huge amount of these fresh produce are sourced from the EU. What's going to happen come January the 1st, Joe?
Yeah, very good question. I think more generally, when thinking about what the future holds, there are 4 things that we need to bear in mind. We need to plan for a sustained inflated demand for take-home food and drink. We need to bear in mind that volumes are going to be pretty resilient to any kind of recession. We're going to look to save money in other areas of our spending. The way that we shop is going to change, so we're probably going to be trying to shop in cheaper stores or buying cheaper products in the same store. Secondly, we need to think about how we win in e-commerce. So, Brexit aside, that's going to be a huge force in the next couple of years. And for fruit in particular, there's a huge opportunity to maximize fruit's presence in big trips online. Fruit is currently losing about 70 odd p in every trip compared to supermarkets, which online equates to about £20 million lost every 12 weeks if you even quantify the size of that opportunity. So we need to get online ready as an industry. We also need to prepare for an escalation in a focus on value activity. So retailers are going to start adopting trends to try and make shoppers more loyal, like price matching lower priced retailers and incentivizing shoppers to spend more of their basket spend there. And finally, we need to remember that devaluing categories and focusing on that value tier doesn't necessarily always prove to be the best way to grow the category. If we consider a lot of produce categories that are very kind of core or staple in their nature, in that a large proportion of the UK population buys them very often, the best route for growth in those categories is through getting shoppers to buy it more often, so pulling that frequency metric, and charging a higher price per pack. So premiumisation is going to be incredibly important for category growth, and we can't just let everyone kind of rush to that value tier because we're all going to be looking to save money.
Joe, well done. It's almost like I set you up with a question, but honestly, I didn't. I think fantastic answer. Ed, with you looking after the fruit category for the FPJ Big 50, and yes, we have these fantastic examples of the likes of Caro and the Gotham business and their fantastic apples, but there's a lot of product that comes in globally. So South Africa grows and exports 4.5 million tons of fresh produce a year, and a lot of it comes to us, a lot of it comes to Europe, a lot of it comes to Asia. Ed, what's your take on Brexit come January or 2021 ongoing? Are we going to see product not on the shelves because of Brexit? Ed, what do you think?
Interesting you say that, actually, because I remember when, or just before coronavirus, or as it was kicking off, a lot of retailers were saying how they'd actually already been preparing for that scenario because of Brexit, and that's why they were sort of better prepared to deal with shortages. So in some sense, the retailers were preparing for it. I couldn't tell you, I mean, if we're going to see empty shelves as such, but we were obviously sort of talking about that 2 years ago now, and and then a year later in the build up to what was initially supposed to be the first Brexit. And I mean, I'm sort of in the process of going back through my old copy of the Brexit, trying to remind myself where we were at before. Obviously, the Department of Trade had been busy trying to strike new trade deals in the meantime. And I guess it will come down to the kind of trade deals we have. And obviously, with the transition period's ending on December 31st this year, and we're still no closer to a comprehensive trade deal with Europe. I think the issue will be whether or not we have trade deals. I gather that effectively there will still be, if someone gets paperwork wrong, you're causing delays at the border. And so it doesn't matter how great your trade deals are, there's a high chance there'll be delays at the border. So how that then plays into perishable goods, we'll see. I don't think there will be, the government will allow food shortages of fresh produce on the shelves. Yeah. I think what would be interesting, just something that jumped to mind actually, as you turn to Brexit, was a story I wrote a couple of weeks ago about the House of Lords signaling its intent to push through CRISPR being legalized effectively in this country once we break away from EU. So the chance to gene edit crops. And I think that's a really interesting that would be a huge macro change in the industry going forward for the UK. Because effectively, I see fresh produce quite largely through varietal developments and trends. I think that has a huge influence on what sells and what does well. If you look at lots of categories on the FPJ Big 50 list, whether it's avocados or raspberries, you name it, they've done really well. A lot of that's been in the back of big varietal breakthroughs or developments. And we could effectively have an open playing field if CRISPR is allowed to be sort of integrated into the industry in terms of breeding. So that could have a huge influence on the list going forward, in my opinion.
Ed, fascinating. Thank you. And Fred, just coming to you with your salad head on, I gave the example of this new glasshouse that's been built just north of us and Bury St Edmunds, and in parallel they're building one in Norwich. And unbelievably, they've got plans for 41. I'll just say again, 41 more glasshouses if they can get the funding and the planning permission in the UK. And we all know the amount of new glass that is going up, either in the likes of Evesham or the south. Do you think Fred, there's going to be a sort of an internal cannibalization of the sales from overseas, of especially the likes of salad products, because we're looking to grow more our own within the UK? What do you think, Fred?
It does really seem like the glasshouse sector, in particularly in tomatoes and cucumbers, is gearing up for Brexit and trying to really bolster domestic production, and that's really good news for the sector. I think there's going to be somebody that I contacted for the Big 50 on tomatoes said that they expect there to be British only supply of top tier tomatoes in all of the retailers in the not too distant future.
Wow.
So, I mean, whether that will be the case, we'll wait to see. But I think with all of that expansion, it's definitely not out of the question. Following on from what Ed said, delays at the border are of a particular concern to the salad category because of the very short shelf life. I mean, they're literally, like, salad heads are literally harvested in Murcia and then brought straight up to the UK, and it would be a disaster if there were big borders for that big delays for that sector. So yeah, I think we're going to see plenty more of this kind of preparation, as it were, and I think that could be really good news for domestic suppliers.
Brilliant. Fred, just an admin point. If you look at the, I think it's on the Q&A, there's a couple of people that want to link in with you. So if you could respond to them, that'd be fantastic. So Michael, do you think we're going to survive Brexit, fresh produce wise?
Yes, I do. I think that, as the guys said, the government's got to get this sorted out. I think we're going to see, again, a whole load of brinkmanship, and it's going to go right up to the last minute, and it's going to be really stressful and irritating and, frankly, entirely pointless. But that's what's going to happen. But ultimately, the EU is overwhelmingly our biggest trading partner in food and in fresh produce, and we can't be having tariffs, we can't be having delays at borders. They've got to make this as simple as possible, and if it isn't, there's going to be uproar. I think we're in for months of stress and uncertainty, but ultimately they'll have to figure this out. They'll have to. But it is a great opportunity. We are trying to increase our self-sufficiency, and we should try to do that as much as we possibly can. And I hope that the mechanisms and the support structures are in place to allow growers to do that.
And we've said it before in previous webcasts that we are but 4 missed meals from anarchy, and there's no way that any government would ever want that to happen, because frankly they get voted out. So you can see that, yeah, absolutely. I take completely on board, Michael, what you say about the brinkmanship, but you would hope that they would look to settle things out so that there's definitely food on the table. So just a slight change of the subject. It's a really interesting question coming from an anonymous attendee, and it reads: any update on footfall numbers in traditional supermarkets? We're seeing retail footfall significantly down. Surely this is also happening in traditional supermarkets, and could one of the biggest supermarkets exit the market? So Joe, I'm just wondering if that's actually a retailer who's dumped that in. So, but that aside, what's your take on the retail perspective? We mentioned earlier about the likes of Amazon coming in and the likes of Ocado saying that there's, especially with the union that they've now created with M&S, which goes live in September, October. Do you think we're going to see a complete change of the retail landscape as we get through 2020?
I think complete change probably goes a bit far. We are going to see some changes. If you look at the percentage of online, for instance, in UK sales, it's hovering around 10% at the moment. Lots of speculation that could rise to about 25 or 30% like it is in China. I don't think that's realistic based on the base it has to come from. We're going to see an escalation in the amount of online shopping that we do for groceries, definitely. I would think it more likely that one of the retailers decides to kind of diversify their channel presence rather than getting out of the markets altogether. So there's going to be far more focus on online, on tie-ups with the likes of Deliveroo, and on convenience as well. If you look at where the spend has moved long term, we've seen a long-term movement of value away from main estate stores towards convenience, towards the discounters, and a little bit, but not much, towards online. You're now seeing spend coming out of the discounters and continuing to come out of main estate stores, continuing to go to online and convenience. So I think it's far more likely that someone decides to pursue those specific channels that shoppers are shopping more and more in, rather than exit the market altogether, because it seems like there are still so many opportunities.
Ed, come on, what do you think? Do you think that in the short, medium term, you might actually be reporting a story about a retailer vacating the market completely? Well, I suppose a bit like Walmart and Asda. Walmart don't really want to be in the UK market, hence why they've been trying to perhaps promote Asda to be sold on. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo Joe's comments in saying I don't know if someone's just going to walk off. That would be quite a story. Yeah, I mean, it's we sort of obviously we write up the KANTAR market share reviews every month, and obviously the discounters have been growing phenomenally, and there's sort of some retailers of the big four, whether it's Morrisons, Sainsbury's, or Asda, sometimes posted some flat results. But I mean, I think obviously the big story last year was the failed merger between Asda and Sainsbury's, and Mike Coop was raging against that on the Sainsbury's website. I don't think so. I couldn't tell you otherwise. I think that, again, echoing Joe's comments, the formats and the channels will change, particularly after coronavirus. I've been talking to a few people who mentioned how convenience stores are going to sort of start stocking more whole head produce and ingredients rather than just sort of ready products and convenience products, which will be, I think, a big change as they cater to coronavirus trends in home cooking and whatnot. But yeah, I can't see a retailer sort of packing up and leaving anytime soon.
Maybe what's more likely to happen is I think the big elephant in the room on retail is Amazon, and it's not that somebody's going to quit, but is Amazon has the cash to buy somebody else up, and that's the really big question. If they decide they want to go into physical stores in a really meaningful way, the quickest way they could do it is to buy up one of the other retail chains. So obviously they've had a taster of it with Whole Foods, but if they want to really go mainstream and do it quickly, then that would be one way that they could do it, and they've got the money to do it. So I think what Amazon does, although they're a pretty small player in grocery at the moment, is the one to watch over the next couple of years. So
Michael, who do you think Amazon's going to buy?
Well, I mean, you said Walmart keen to get out of the market. That would be one that you would look at. You know, Sainsbury's have also been linked in the past with Middle East buyers and other people. So they're one that I don't see. Tesco being for sale. Morrison's has got its family roots. That's unlikely. But I guess, you know, Sainsbury's and Asda were both in the market for doing a deal. They might be one that would be ripe for an acquisition.
Yeah, it feels like it's, guys, it feels like it's evolution, not revolution, that as we're going through this peculiar market, and it does feel that the consumer is wanting to do more scratch cooking, is wanting to buy more organics, that the offering from the retailers or the home delivery services have got to change to this adaptation, especially on this home delivery side. So I think that, oh crikey, the next 2-3 years is going to be fascinating. And then with this sort of information that is coming through from you guys with the assistance of Joe, it's definitely going to help all of the people in the sector to hopefully focus in as to which markets they should be aiming for that are going to be give them longevity and give them profitability. So guys, we're just slightly running out of time. Just so we can wrap up, I just want to go around each of you individually and for you to tell everyone listening in as to what you think that they need to do in this crazy world of economics and fresh food and retail, what they need to do to create success for them and their businesses. So it's a simple question, but it's a tough one. So let's start with Joe. Joe, what have companies got to do to create success in this odd, fascinating market, please?
I think in the short term, it's get into e-commerce, have more of a presence there, and realise the opportunity of, you know, a huge £20 million plus opportunity for fruit in e-commerce, and a smaller but still significant opportunity for veg. That's definitely one. We need to carry on reinforcing that message of premiumisation as well. There's going to be a huge rush to value activity, and we can't allow ourselves, or we can't allow manufacturers to get kind of sucked into that and devalue their categories. We've got to push back to retailers and say, I know what's best for my category. I know that premiumisation or frequency growth is a significant lever, and the way to achieve that isn't just through devaluing it, through increased value tier activity. I think if we do that alongside planning for that sustained inflated demand for take-home food and drink, then we can make a real success of the increased volumes of food that we're buying.
Joe, well done. Ed, shall you and I go out and I don't know, go behind the sofa and down the back of the seats of my car and get some spare change and buy Sainsbury's, and we can create success together?
Yeah, sure. That's a good idea. We'll buy Sainsbury's.
Okay, we'll do that by 4. But in the meantime, what do you think? What can people do with your knowledge, your advice, your learnings from creating the FPJ Big 50 to create success?
I mean, I'm a jack of all trades, really. So I don't know what sort of really concrete advice I could give. I think one thing I would say is something that we sort of maybe would have been talking about more if coronavirus hadn't happened, has been forgotten a bit, is sort of the issue of plastics and the environmental issue that was obviously a huge concern just a matter of months ago. And so, you know, obviously it depends on what kind of business you are, but, you know, keep thinking about the way consumers are still very concerned about the environment and plastics and packaging, and don't let that fall by the wayside to other concerns, because that's going to be, that issue is only going to return in arguably a stronger way as we go forward. So keep that front of the mind, despite obviously everything else that's happening.
Ed, well done, fantastic. So Fred, if Ed and I are going to buy Sainsbury's, you and I, what do you want to buy? Do you want to buy Asda or Amazon?
Well, I'd go for Amazon. I think then you've got the biggest purchasing power of everyone. But yeah, one thing I would just mention, which I think has been coming up in the chat, is that Amazon actually are already in a partnership with Morrison's. So they Morrison's offers online delivery through Amazon. So I don't know, maybe they could end up kind of deepening that partnership going forward. Let's see. But in terms of advice for suppliers, I mean, I think e-commerce is kind of the big opportunity in the short term for sure, and there's a lot of sales to be won there. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Aldi's trial of home deliveries and how that fits with their model, and whether Lidl follows suit, because I mean their model is quite different from the rest of the big four. Their stores are quite stripped back, their overheads are low, and they're still able to offer very low prices and pay their staff pretty good wages. So I wonder whether that will work, whether they can draw on a logistics network and make that work financially. If they can, I think they'll be I think they'll continue to grow at pace, and that will obviously shake up the market. But yeah, I think also tiering is going to be crucial, because value in the next few years, value offerings will be very important, but you need to kind of keep those premium tiers and add to them, I think, in order to not just strip all of the value out of the fresh produce category. And sustainability and provenance, although it's not a top priority for everyone, for particularly lower income consumers who have other concerns, completely understandably, it's growing in importance. And I think it's really important for suppliers to shout about those things, and to highlight them on pack as much as possible.
Fred, well done. Michael, just coming over to you to wrap up. But Michael, can I just say I'm just so impressed with Fred and Ed. It goes without saying that we're impressed with Joe. He knows that. But I haven't seen Fred and Ed speak in this sort of format over and above the likes of the FPJ Live. Michael, you must be very proud of these guys. I just love what they're saying, that it's not just the whole fresh produce side, it's the environmental side, it's the sustainability side. I'm just going to say again, you must be very, very proud of those guys. I'm
incredibly proud of them. Journalism's not easy at the moment, and I won't go on to a rant about that, because it's a webinar in its own right. But it's a very difficult industry to work in at the moment. There's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of social media. It's hard to kind of cut through that and speak honestly and try to get the facts through. And these two guys have absolutely thrown themselves into this industry. They've immersed themselves in it. They've built contacts up. They're doing an absolutely superb job, and they're doing this at a time when, like every other publication in the country, we've got a much smaller staff. There's just the two of them with some help from me and the wider FruitNet editorial team, and they put out a huge amount of content, high quality content. People don't realize, Farmers Weekly have 20, 25 journalists. Yep. The Grocer has 20, 25 full-time journalists. FPJ has 2.5 full-time journalists, and yet puts out a daily newsletter with this level of content, an app of this kind of level of a top-notch publication, multimedia events, and I do hope that the industry realizes just the huge volume of work that goes in behind the scenes to make the FPJ what it is, and Fred and Ed are doing a tremendous job. I'm incredibly proud of them.
And everyone within the sector, if you want to help the sector, engage with Ed, Fred, Michael, Joe, even more so, because we've got such a good story to tell. So guys, I think we're going to. It's been fantastic. We've had some really great comments. There's so many different tangents we could go on. So the elements that we mustn't forget to just highlight is to again promote the FPJ app. So who did we pin on it last time? Was it Ed? Ed, just to remind, a quick line, promote the FPJ ad. How can we get it, please?
As I said at the beginning, I can't promote it any more than telling you just to simply get your iPhones out, get your App Store up or the Google Play, depending if you have an Android and iPhone, and just type in Fresh Produce Journal and it'll come up. Again, it's free to download, so you have continuous access to the rolling news feeds that we have online. Thanks, Cara. I can see she's plugging it. Yeah, I think what I would add also is you can buy one-off editions of the magazine. So if you just want the FPJ Big 50, you can buy that, or you can subscribe to the full catalogue through it as well. Any issues, just give us a ring or email subscriptions@fruitnet.com. It's super easy. Give it a try.
Fantastic. And Fred, tell us about the, I'm having to go tiptoe to look over my laptop. Tell us about the FPJ live event, 6th of October. How can we find out more about that? How can we register for it, please?
So we'll be putting information up on our website about the program as it's finalised, but we've already got some great speakers on board. It's going to be not FruitNet's first virtual online event. We've done 1 or 2 already this year, which have gone really well. But we're going to try and have the same sort of multi-platform format that we have at the physical event. There's going to be live panel discussions. There's going to be presentations. There's going to be a virtual networking area. So there's basically going to be a map that you can navigate around as if you were there in person. So it's looking like it's going to be quite an exciting event.
Fantastic. And Joe, I'm going on tiptoe to see, my last bit is to promote the services of KANTAR. Just again, reiterate to everyone what KANTAR does.
Yeah, so all about consumer behaviour. We're looking at how consumers are interacting with your categories, what the opportunities are in your categories to increase purchasing, and how you can take that to retailers and grow your business.
Fantastic. Well done. And I've asked everyone to get their favourite fresh produce. So I have got, as I showed off earlier, some flat peaches and some clementines from South Africa. What's everyone else got, please?
Sweet potato.
Onion. Admittedly, first thing I could find in the fridge.
Fred, what have you got?
I've got some baby plum tomatoes.
Excellent. Okay.
That's
Ned,
my favourite. I got a family pack of strawberries because they've been doing very well recently. So
fantastic. And we must also promote English apples for our dear friend Carol. Everyone, that's a fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for our sponsors. We'll see you on the next one. All the best to Joe from KANTAR and all the fantastic team at the FPJ. Keep supporting them because we need them to promote this industry. Well done, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
well
Max.
done, everyone. Bye, bye, bye,
Thanks,
bye.
Max. Thanks, everyone.
thank you so much.
Bye, 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 bye.